I think the personal vehicles, that's the type I can land in my driveway, park in my garage, and throw in the back of an F-150 or Ram pickup and take to the mountains. I think that's in the 5 to 10 year range. The Pivotal unit sells for about $200,000. The individual I talked to bought one of the first ones that sold, and he lives in eastern Washington State. So I asked him, talking to him the way I'm talking to you, how many times have you flown it? Do you keep track? Yes, I do. And what's the count? And he says, 422 times. And I said, what's your average time in the air? And he says, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. And I said, do you have any regrets? And he says, absolutely no regrets. I'm just looking for them to get bigger, faster, better.
I was a kid, I watched the Jetsons. I was supposed to have a flying car by now. But first, subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon for notifications and find Devil's Advocate Podcast on your favorite platform. Tim Jackson, you've been involved in the mobility fight for a long time. Excuse me, but dude, where is my flying car?
A flying car, you will be able to have a flying car and land it in your driveway, park it in your garage, and some of them will be small enough you can throw in the back of an F-150 or a Ram pickup and take to the mountains to fly.
You're high. You are completely high. It's not going to happen. There will not be flying cars. That was just a cartoon. There are no flying cars.
They are on the way.
Really?
Really. There are back in the early days of automotive, there were 2,000 automakers trying to get started in the 1900 to 1920 timeframe. They were starting in blacksmith shops and livery stables and backyards and barns. I'd say driveways and garages, but we didn't even have driveways and garages yet. Today, there are fewer than 30 that produce over 95% of the cars. But on the flying cars, the drones are the precursor. Bicycles were precursors to cars. Drones are the precursor to flying cars. And drone technology is becoming really amazing. It's an amazing advantage for society. It's used in everything now from medical device delivery to emergency services, police detection, and military.
So the technology is coming. Listen, I remember years back when somebody said, soon we're going to have driverless cars. I thought he was high. So I've become a believer. Before we get into that, let's just go backward in time just a little bit. First, from your professional life, you ran the Auto Dealers Association for a long time. You're a bicyclist. You actually bicycle on roads and places, but you're also a critic of all these ridiculous bike lanes that are being forced in. They call it road dieting, and so they take away lanes of car traffic so that people can ride their bicycles. You have this strange hobby of actually going out and collecting data on how much they're using. Tell me the latest one, because this is what I found mind-blowing.
Yeah, and by the way, good bicycle infrastructure is important, but down the middle of the busiest streets in town really doesn't make sense. And that's what Denver is doing. That's what some other cities are doing. And they're really not attracting many cyclists. There's not an increase. After Denver spent $14.3 million.
$14.3 million.
To expand, to finish the bike lane from South Broadway about I-25 and Spear Boulevard or Cherry Creek. It's only 1.3 tenths of a mile, 1 3/10 of a mile, and it's $14.3 million. And I can't detect any increase in cycling activity.
And you actually go down there and do timed tests on this.
We've done time tests since the expansion. We've done one every year since 2019.
You actually count how many bicyclists.
And it's always less than 1%. It's usually about 2/10, 3/10, or 4/10 of 1% of the commuter traffic are in the bike lanes. Yet the bike lane takes 20% of the lanes. And by the way, for those that wonder where are we going to put the cyclists and do we want them to be safe? I want them to be safe. I want to be safe on my cyclists. Yeah. So I would say put them over on Sherman Street or Grant Street or Acoma on the other side.
My frustration is this is obviously part of the war on mobility. It's war on cars. Even on side streets where they put up these barriers, it means that you can't get around somebody who's making a left-hand turn and waiting. So it drives up traffic. It means people can't turn around. Emergency vehicles can't turn around. People are going to die because of these things. And it's all just to force people out of their cars. And I find the whole thing pretty insulting.
I was just at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I saw a news report. Even though they've done a lot of what Denver has done, they've taken away lanes and parking to add bicycle lanes. They've actually seen an increase in bicycle fatalities, the very thing they're trying to avoid, and we all should want to avoid.
Really?
We want no bicycle fatalities. We want no human fatalities related to cars. But the bicycle lanes are actually increasing fatalities, or they have so far in Washington, D.C.
Let's jump into mobility. I am passionate about personal mobility. People don't get this. And in my world, a lot of folks are, educational choice. They understand that a kid who gets a bad education has no choice to get a good education, that it's going to affect their whole property or their whole life. I feel the same way about mobility choice. Now, you show me a man who is limited to RTD or public transit in a place like Denver. I will show you a man who will forever be on the bottom rung of the economic ladder. Usually black and brown people who are forced to live in one place that buses come and work on a place where buses go. Whereas when I got my first $500 car, I could live where I want, work where I want, start my business, go to school for that mobility freedom. And particularly poor people don't need a bus pass, they need a car. What Henry Ford did, making an automobile affordable, was to democratize mobility so that we all, and 100 years later, are having a lifestyle unheard of before in human history because of personal mobility. I think you share that kind of vision.
Oh, absolutely. And the first chapter in the book, out of 90 chapters, is that cars are essential, and it lays out all the important reasons that cars. The things that motor vehicles will do for society and do for society that don't happen any other way. And we as Americans, we want to be able to go from point A to point B. We want to be able to go places. We want freedom of mobility. And I'm for that in whatever form it takes to get me there, whether that's in the air, in a plane, in a car, on a bike, on rollerblades, on a bus. But cars are the essential tool to get you there as quick as possible in the shortest route as possible.
Automobiles allow for economic mobility.
They do.
That's the key, and that's why when we spend our money in transit, and people who are stuck on transit will forever be at the bottom rung. And we do this terrible thing where we tax people who are poor with sales tax to buy trolleys so guys with cars don't have to pay parking at a Rockies game. If that's not systematic racism, I'm not too sure what it is. Let's talk about, dude, where's my flying car? And I know your love for this. Start out with mobility. Where did we start with mobility? Was it Henry Ford first?
Ransom Eli Olds actually was ahead of Henry Ford over in Lansing, Michigan. In 1898, he was building the curved dash Oldsmobile. And he was building it on the assembly line. His assembly line worked different than Henry Ford's. It was where the cars stayed stationary and the workers moved down the assembly line. He had franchise dealers in 1898, 8 years before Henry Ford built the Model T, or designed the Model T. He took it to the second, he didn't get it to the first, but he took it to the second New York Auto Show. The first one was 1900, the second one was 1901. He had a senior...
If I understand, back then, there were cars before Henry Ford. It's just that they were outrageously expensive because they were basically hand-built.
Everyone was hand-built.
Everyone was a kit.
Yes.
Everyone was designed differently.
All very low volume and high cost, and that's why most of those companies did not make it. But he took it to the New York Auto Show. He had a dealer there that ordered 750 of them, and he said he hadn't built 750 yet. And he said, well, this is a big news story, but if you make the order 1,000, that's an even bigger story. So the guy ordered 1,000. It took him 2 years to build the first 500 for that order.
Wow. And then the next step was Henry Ford, who perfected a manufacturing line and built a product that his employees could afford.
Right. And it should be noted that Ransom Olds, David Buick, Henry Ford, over in Germany, Carl Benz, were all bike techs before they were car guys. Henry Ford worked at Detroit Bicycle Company before he started the Henry Ford Company, which was before he started Ford Motor Company.
You're kidding. I had no idea that.
Yeah.
So they were bicycle manufacturers, repairers. Because
bicycles were the precursor to all of this.
Well, because people needed mobility, and bicycles took what you could walk and doubled, tripled, quadrupled that. Wilbur and Orville Wright were bicycle guys.
They were. And over in Dayton, Ohio, 1903, they were designing the plane for the first flight, which became Kitty Hawk in North Carolina. They also, ironically, not only had a bike shop, found this in the research on the book, they had a bike shop in Dayton, Ohio that they built the plane in, but they also had a car dealership across town in Dayton, Ohio. So they were car guys, bike guys, and aviation guys. Isn't that cool?
Mobility guys. They were mobility guys. They got it. What I heard about how they designed the wing, they did two things. Is that one, they figured out how to do a simulation test, like a small scale wing, and run air over it to see how it lifted. But they got the idea when one of them was holding a piece of rubber they were using to make tires, and he started bending it, and he said, wait a second, we need a wing that bends instead of one that just is flat.
Stiff, yeah.
And that was, because they were hands-on
game
guys.
changer, yeah.
They were hands-on guys, much like Steve Jobs was a hands-on guy and changed everything. All right, so we get to the point where people can buy automobiles. Then what happened?
Then that it took off. In fact, cars became so popular so fast that bicycles became kind of left by the wayside. And Detroit Bicycle Company that Henry Ford started out in went into financial trouble in 1917, and Henry Ford actually bought it to keep it alive and going because he had started his career there.
Wow. So again, what I love about capitalism, what I love about innovation, is this creative destruction. So this comes along and destroys the buggy business or the horse business, and I never realized there was also the bicycle business. It changes America. It unleashes a middle class for the first time in American history. It was the most important thing to build, to bring wealth down to huge amounts of people, because you could live where you could afford, but you could work where you make the most money. You could enjoy your lives, and you didn't have to live on a trolley line. You didn't have to work on a trolley line. It made America.
You didn't have to live in the downtown core of the city. It actually created suburbs.
Yeah.
And suburbia was created and enabled because of the freedom of the car. And that's notable and laudable, because those suburbs are still building out. They're still building roads out there, even while Denver takes lanes away in the city. Roads are more than overcompensating in the suburbs in rural America.
And then comes what we call sprawl, and we hate it, and traffic jams, because governments like to try to tell you to go use transit, so they put your money into transit. The reason Colorado, and Denver particularly, has such crap roads is because the taxing capacity has gone to trolley cars and trains and transit instead of building a road infrastructure, which we all need. When along this storyline do we get to something that goes in the air?
Well, 1903 was the creation of the first flight at Kitty Hawk, and so airlines really started taking off, pun intended, about the late 1920s and early 1930s. And then, of course, helicopters came along. The first helicopters, they were called gyrocopters, the early ones, and they were invented in the 1930s and starting to make an industry of their own. And this whole aviation industry is, I was just at an aviation conference in Washington, D.C. It's fascinating the way it tracks automotive in so many ways. Many ways. Technologies, their challenges. They're dealing with the same challenges as an industry that automotive is dealing with. One is emissions. They're being criticized for their emissions, and they can't make a 737, 757, 777, or 787 battery powered, battery electric. You just can't get enough batteries to propel a 777. So they are looking for one of their solutions, and I heard this in sessions at the conference, is SNF or SAF, which is Sustainable Aviation Fuel. But they think of it in the automotive world, we've had unleaded gas for 20 years, right? So it's really taking the lead out. It's taking the bad pollutants out. But so far, the SAF is only being used in less than 1% of flights.
That's safe fuel.
Sustainable aviation fuel. So they are looking at, and I think same way the automotive industry was pressed and pressured to get emission free. So that's gone through electrification, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and the like. So is aviation. So these flying cars that there are now 200 startup companies in the trying to get off the ground with flying cars.
200.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So when you said there were thousands of automotive companies have made cars, and now there's 20, 30 major ones, there are right now hundreds of people trying to make flying cars, which begs the question, what the hell is a flying car? Give me a definition. Is a plane a flying car?
Of these 200 companies, no, a plane would not be, but a plane is a plane, I guess. But so the technical definition for a flying car is a VTOL, and that's a VTOL, which is an acronym for vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. These have been around a while. There was a VTOL. I didn't know this until I did the research on the book, but there was a VTOL created right here in Denver, Colorado, by an innovator in the early 1930s that he wanted to have a car that he could drive on the road, and he wanted to make it airborne through vertical takeoff. He was able to make it drive. He never got it into the air, and it sat apparently on display in the Stapleton Airport, the old Stapleton Airport, in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now it's in Nashville, Tennessee, in an automotive museum. So
by the way, there was such a vehicle, and it early on, and it actually worked flawlessly. It was had a name, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which was also a car that could do a vertical lift.
Yes.
And that one worked really well.
In my presentations, I use Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Harry Potter, James Bond 007, and of course the Jetsons. The Jetsons TV series on in 1962, 28 episodes on ABC television.
Only 28?
28, and it's still in syndication today. Think about that, over 60 years later. All of the technologies that were promised in the Jetsons have now come to fruition, except for the flying car. So when you get the flying car...
No. We are not living on top of poles. We don't have buildings on... we never... In the Jetsons, they never went down to whatever... All the buildings were up in the stratosphere on a pole. So
well, that's true.
Not that part, but phones, the robotics, flat screen TV.
The talking telephones, the elevators, of course, the microwave ovens, and flat screen TVs. All that.
And Rosie, the maid was Rosie, I think.
Yeah, I think it was Rosie.
Yeah. And we've got
My Boy Elroy.
Now it's called Roomba.
Yeah, exactly. So when we get to the flying car, the vision of the Jetsons is finally fulfilled.
And so the idea of a flying car, let me see if I got this, is a helicopter. Isn't that all you're talking about? A flying car is a helicopter, something that goes up and comes down, and you can sit in it.
Most of these would be more comparable to a helicopter than to a regular motor vehicle or a car, but the differences are a helicopter is either jet powered or at least combustion engine powered, and all of these are being developed as battery electric to begin with. They are exploring with hydrogen fuel cell, and some have done test flights with hydrogen fuel cell, and they, instead of having one single large prop that carries the lift and creates a lot of noise and a lot of wind, by the way, that lift is dispersed in among 6, 8, 10, in some cases 12 or 16 much smaller props. So that makes these VTOLs, flying cars, much lower in noise level and wind disruption.
Now, I am learning from my mistakes. When I first heard about driverless cars, I was like, dude, no. And now I'm like, okay. And then drones, when I first heard about drones, all I could think of were, military drones, dropping bombs on things. But drones being used for delivery, for keeping an eye on your farm, keeping an eye on your agriculture and your cattle, search and rescue, delivery, places that send medicine by drone. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
New Year's Eve shows.
Oh yeah.
4th of July shows?
The entertainment of drones. So I can see a time where the cost comes down and the technology becomes stable enough that maybe I'm willing to put my butt in a flying car. Are you right now, are there people who are flying these cars, human beings in these drones flying around?
Yes. Yes.
How many have died?
None that I know of.
Really?
Yeah, none that I know of. And in the book, one of the things I've said, you may remember on the autonomous cars, and I've in the auto industry, I've laid witness to that development, and I do believe that they will happen and that they will ultimately be safer. I don't want people to be forced to have to only ride in an autonomous car and take the freedom to drive away. But I think it's a great advantage if you want to drive to Chicago and let the car drive you for a while you take a nap. That would be great technology. But you probably remember when Uber had an accident late at night. They had a test. They had an overseeing driver in that was supposed to prevent that, but he was asleep at the switch. The car hit a woman walking a bicycle across a street where she probably shouldn't have been at 2:00 in the morning, and it was fatality. And that shut the Uber program down. So in the book, I say, you've heard the old phrase, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the really, really good. When it comes to both autonomous cars and flying cars or VTOLs, the perfect will be the enemy of the really, really good. They will have to literally be perfect, and no fatalities. And on that score, on America's highways today, and this is one of the challenges I dealt with in the automotive industry, there will be 42,000 people killed on America's highways in 2024. The high water mark on that was 1972 at 52,000. Wow. That was before seatbelts were required. It has come down 20%. That doesn't tell the whole story. Between 72 and 2022, we as Americans, in our desire and ambition for mobility, have tripled the number of vehicle miles traveled. It's gone from 1.1 trillion with the T to 3.3 trillion with the T, and we've still
vehicle
been able
miles.
to decrease it by 20%.
So let me throw that back at you, make sure I've got it. So in this time period, not only have the cars gotten safer and with seatbelts more survivable in crashes, but add to that, the fatalities are going down while the miles driven have tripled since the 70s. That's impressive. But still, we have a Vietnam War every year on the roads. Mm-hmm. We have as many people died in Vietnam, basically dying on the roadways with cars. And we've all known people who we've lost people in accidents, motorcycle accidents, car accidents, but yet we'll drive a car to their funeral. It doesn't scare us away because we crave, need, depend upon that mobility. How are these going to be any safer?
They will be safer. And to do that comparable, or let's say the comparison, in that 42,000 annual fatalities in cars, aviation miles traveled is going up, and we'll hit a record this year. But you have to look back 15 years. You have to go all the way back to 2009 to find the most recent commercial aviation fatality. I mean, it's remarkable. It's not like we wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, another safe day in the air. Nobody's going to die."
Let's stop there for a second, because I used to be fearful of flying because I'm a control guy, and I'm not controlling the flight. I'm some guy who's obviously suicidal because his wife left him, is flying the plane, and he's going to. There hasn't been a fatality
in the U.S.
For nearly a decade, and there are thousands of flights a day. If you thought if 0.5% of every flight, if we had as many flights crash as United States space shuttle crashes as a percentage, I did it one time, and there would be like 1,000 crashes a day or something ridiculous like that. It's not.
That's probably right, yeah.
And so flying is safe, but commercial flying is safe. Small airplanes are not safe. They're still going down. They're still running into things. They're still running out of fuel. Why is this going to be safer?
And almost all of those, and I am a private pilot too. I'm a licensed private pilot. I got my license.
What don't you do? Do you sell Girl Scout cookies?
Age 19. But those fatalities are in the small planes, and frankly, most of those, like most motor vehicle accidents, are pilot error or driver error. And so if you can take the driver error out, and that's what the autonomous cars do.
So these flying cars are going to be like driverless cars, that I'm going to get into mine, I'm going to tell it where I want to go, and it does the rest. Is that basically what it's going to be?
Ultimately, initially they'll need pilots. But some because they're programmed to be flown by a pilot initially.
Okay.
But their ultimate goal, these companies that are starting out, their ultimate goal is to make them fully autonomous. And that could be scary if you don't want to cede control over that vehicle in the air. But I would challenge you, and I want to go back to the 4th of July, to any of the drone shows that were featured all over the country or all around the world and doing the 4th of July, taking the place of fireworks shows. There will be 400 to 500 drones in the air and configurations, either a flag, a waving flag, or a Patriot or whatever. And they are coordinating with each other. They're coordinating through artificial intelligence, AI. And most importantly, John, they're not running into each other and they're not falling out of the sky. So when you see how many cars we have on the road, as designated in the picture on the cover, with the blended taillights, people wonder, how are we going to fill the skies that way? First off, no, because the roads were contained between the ditches, so there are no ditches in the skies. We have complete latitude on breadth and depth of the width of the freeway, and you have different elevations. So they'll ultimately be much, much safer. And when they're autonomous, they'll be talking to each other. And by the way, on the commercial aviation, if you wonder why they are so safe, the 737 almost flies itself today.
And the 737 MAX flies itself into the ground.
Not in the U.S., but yes.
Not in the U.S. Point taken. All right, I've seen science fiction movies where it's the city scene and they're flying cars. Whether it's Blade Runner or Star Wars, there's just highways going here and there. Will it be like that? Will there be highways in the sky, or will they just kind of be going like spaghetti until they get to where they're going?
Let me roll it out this way. One, there's going to be two different types of flying cars. One is going to be called a flying taxi or an air taxi, and those are the ones that I think we will see first. There are companies in the U.S. and around the world contracting with cities around the U.S. and around the world to provide what is called urban air mobility. And that would be, let's say in Denver, you would have what is called we would think of it as a helipad, but in the VTOL arena, they're called vertiports. But a vertiport is just a helipad. It's a place to land the vehicle. You'll have one at DEN, the Denver International Airport. Then you'll have one, say, in downtown, maybe on the top of a parking structure, one in Boulder, one in Broomfield, one in Fort Collins, one in Greeley, one in Loveland, one in Centennial, and all around. And they will be transporting, instead of getting in your car to drive and do rush hour to the airport, you will fly. And from Boulder, I'm going to guess in rush hour, you can allow an hour and 15 minutes to get to the airport to fly out. On these, they will take you in 9 minutes. They'll do this.
Whoa. Time out. Mm-hmm. So I live in Boulder. When I go to the airport, it's a pain. Mm-hmm. It's a pain. And for instance, 270 is always jammed. I don't care when it is. It's just always jammed. Somebody, please widen that highway, for God's sake. And it's awful. And so, yeah, I give myself an hour, 15 minutes to get to. You're telling me that if I could get to this air pad in 10 minutes, I could be at the airport.
10 minutes. And they do the security screening when you get on the VTOL. So when you get to the airport, they can take you right to the concourse. You'll get off your flying car, your air taxi, and get onto your long haul flight. And you'll be off.
What will this cost to start out with?
The cost of operation is much less than you might imagine. IRS deductibility on cars is like 65 cents a mile. The cost of operation on these is about $3.50. I've heard from two different
$3.50 a mile.
$3 to $3.50 a mile, and but they will fill them up. So most Ubers and Lyfts that are going to the airport are carrying one passenger to take to their flight. So they will fill all 4 seats. So if you do the math, they're going to be collecting the Uber or Lyft fare from 4 people instead of 1, and the travel only takes 9 minutes instead of an hour and 15.
Now this is done, for instance, in New York City with a helicopter. You get off in Newark, and it's $100, and they will fly you over the river to the city, so you don't have to get in a traffic jam. So they have that, but it's loud. There's a guy there. You use it on special occasions. It's still not a thing.
That's been the model, though. Yeah. That is.
So we're talking that.
You've got the exact model, but these are better vehicles. They're quieter. They're less expensive.
Why are they better vehicles? Convince me of that, because I know drones. I see drones. I know people that have drones and play with them. I'm not going to put my life in a drone's hand.
Yeah. The reason they're better, 2 primary reasons. One is they're battery electric, so no emissions. And by being battery electric, instead of having a jet engine powering that one prop, it's a lot quieter. So
I don't care about that if I'm sitting in it. I'm thinking electronics. How many times my computer is frozen up? I worry about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm giving you some of the advantages, whether you recognize it sitting in it or not. It's an advantage, and it's going to be a lot lower cost of operation. So I've heard,
it's not going to have a pilot.
Initially, they will.
Right.
Initially, they will, and eventually, they will be without pilots. And on that, the way I describe it is, think about talking about going to Newark Airport from downtown Manhattan. That's the first use case for United with the Whisk that you've seen earlier. Is to launch off of a rooftop in downtown Manhattan. I'm even been told it's the Pan Am building that they're looking at, which has a helipad on the top, and take them over to Newark Airport. And it's a 9-minute flight. And they would let you off. You'd get on your long-haul flight. The security screening would already be done. They'd load 4 more people and bring you back. The Whisk is autonomous. It's built without pilot controls, so a pilot couldn't fly it if the pilot wanted to fly it.
Bad weather.
Bad weather, just like anything else, they will be. DIA's been shut down on the jets. They've stopped flights in and out because of heavy winds twice at least in the last 3 weeks. So when that happens, these will be shut down as well. There may be a lower level of wind that will be the decision point to stop the flights, but they won't fly in bad weather.
Have you ever been in a helicopter?
Yes.
I have. I think it was a long time ago. And it is freaky. I mean, it's just, I got used to airplanes. That's fine. But you're there and it's bizarre. It's really an experience. And I said to the pilot, well, what happens if the engine goes out? And he said, you mean like this? And he disconnected the engine. We started doing that. That dropped. He wanted to scare me. He said, well, we're trained to, how to do that. Helicopters have never caught on commercially. I mean, you can be super rich and do it. The image of having a car is, I can afford it. And so you see a time where I can go to work, come out of my driveway or my flyway, and get into this thing, and it takes me to work, and I could have my own.
I think the urban air mobility or the flying taxi, taxi, will be prevalent in the next 3 to 5 years. They'll be starting out.
3 to 5?
Yeah, and they're starting out next year. Some of them are contracting for services. Here's cities that have contracted. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, both in the United Arab Emirates, but Houston, Texas with Whisk, San Francisco with Archer Aviation. Also, LA is about to with Archer Aviation. Next will be Chicago and New York. And South Florida, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach have contracted with Lilium. So there's about 4 companies that are involved in these contracts. And the contracts
3 to 5 years.
1 to 2 years before they actually start, 3 to 5 before they're prevalent.
Where civilians grab the briefcase and sit on one, and it takes them to something. Not a joyride, but an actual
yes, sir.
ride.
It's going to happen.
Incredible. How certain are you that it's going to happen?
Well, I've moved from a skeptic to a believer, and I've moved from the basic question of if to this more immediate question of when. And I think this commercial aviation, the urban air mobility, will be 3 to 5 years. I think the personal vehicles, that's the type I can land in my driveway, park in my garage, and throw in the back of an F-150 or Ram pickup and take to the mountains. I think that's in the 5 to 10 year range. Although, when you asked me if I'd talked to anybody, I was at the Oshkosh Air Show where some of these were on display and demonstration, and I talked to one of the early purchasers of one called Pivotal. Pivotal is a Canadian company, but they're produced in Silicon Valley, and it was funded by Larry Page, co-founder of Google. And this Pivotal unit, there was an article on this in the New Yorker on April 15. The Pivotal unit sells for about $200,000. The individual I talked to bought one of the first ones that sold, and he lives in eastern Washington State. So I asked him, talking to him the way I'm talking to you, how many times have you flown it? Do you keep track? Yes, I do. And what's the count? And he says, 422 times. And I said, what's your average time in the air? And he says, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. And I said, do you have any regrets? And he says, absolutely no regrets. I'm just looking for them to get bigger, faster, better.
It's funny, I know guys who have spent upwards of $100,000 for a spec'd out Ford, 150 or 250 or something like that. And this guy has something that flies for double that amount.
Yes.
And he uses it.
Yes.
How is it going to work? How's it going to work in a parking lot? We're all going to work, and we all take our flying car, and do we just drop into our little parking spaces, or do we get down and somebody's got to move it? Is it?
Well, I think both could happen, but yes, I think you would be able. The Pivotal, for example, and I didn't go up in it myself, but I did do a simulated ride in a Pivotal, and so it's all programmed out so you can see yourself landing in that spot, in that parking spot, and you pick where I was picking which parking spot I was landing in, so that's the way it works. But yeah, you'll have a lot of cameras, and the technology will be letting you know if there's any obstructions near or whatever. So
that's a lot of trust in software. With an airplane, I'm on a 737. Yeah, I understand it's almost all computers, but there's a couple guys up front. That makes me feel a little bit better. And when a plane runs out of power, at least it can do some things on the way down. A drone, my sense is when the software goes or a blade goes or something goes, it just comes crashing down. Unlike automobiles, I think there's going to be a fear issue for a lot of customers. Do you think? I mean, or am I just old and
I think
scared of anything new?
There's a trust factor that will have to be built up, and we all have that, and we have that threshold of trust when we're going to say, well, like a carnival ride or a ride in an amusement park that's pretty treacherous. I'm going to go do that, and then you get on it, and then what in the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
Because you see what you just cut yourself into. But by the way, they are doing training on these, and there will be some sort of certification coming. There was an FAA legislation that was enacted in May of this year, and it authorizes, and in fact requires the FAA to develop certifications for further certifications of drones and drone technology, and also the VTOLs, the flying cars, both certifying the units, the flying units, and certifying those that need pilots for flying them.
What brought you from being a skeptic to a believer, that you are now 100% certain this is the future?
These things, where the money's coming from, and the money is coming from three definitive pockets. One is aircraft manufacturers, including Boeing, Airbus, Bell Helicopter, and Embraer. And by the way, Boeing and Airbus are not just invested in one. Boeing's invested in 1, 2, 3, 4 of these companies. Some are in-house projects and some are external that they're buying into. Second category is airlines, and those include United, Delta, American, Southwest, and JetBlue. And they're looking like the project I described.
And by the way, when Spirit gets into the business, I'm out of there. Right?
Yeah, Spirit's not in yet, so far so good. And then thirdly is automotive, and that's I couldn't believe this was going on, and I was in automotive for all these years. I didn't see it, didn't know it, and didn't understand that was happening. So Toyota and Honda and Hyundai, Stellantis, which is the former Chrysler, BMW and Mercedes, and Ford all have investments to varying degrees. Hyundai's is a totally internal project. They're not looking for other investors. It's totally funded by Hyundai.
So basically what I'm hearing is you believe because people with a lot of money are now believing for reasons that are probably pretty sophisticated. They know the business and they know the markets. They believe they're going to put money into it. What else got you to be a believer?
Secondly, it's how far along that they've come with these, with two things: the development of the units, the actual technology to make them work, to make them fly, and the production facilities. So production facilities, there's a factory that is now framed in and ready to move the equipment in later this year, and they'll be producing flying cars, VTOLs, air taxis by January 1 next year by Archer Aviation. That's in Covington, Georgia, 30 miles east of Atlanta. Second location for one of these is the one on the cover of the book. Joby Aviation has determined where they're going to build their facility. And ironically, I think this is so cool, as a nod to Orville and Wilbur Wright, it'll be in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, that is cool.
Their major investors are, by the way, Archer's major investors are Boeing, United Airlines, and Stellantis. Joby's major investors are Boeing, Delta Airlines, and Toyota. Toyota has literally $1 billion invested in Joby, and they're helping design the factory to build them, and they will help build them.
All right, let's wrap this up a little bit. I think you're right. You have convinced me. I don't know if the time schedule is right. You know, I think driverless cars are harder to do than people think, and it's taking longer. There's more things to get over, but it's happening. So if I've got my $100 to invest in a company, where should I put it now so that in a few years it turns into 200?
The three companies I like the most are these are all in the urban air mobility space. One is Wisk, but it's wholly owned by Boeing, so that's a whole other decision whether you invest in Boeing at this point. The other two are completely independent. One is Archer Aviation. It's headquartered in Silicon Valley, and this is one invested in by United and Stellantis. The other is Joby, and it's invested by Boeing, Toyota,
How do you spell Joby?
Delta. Joby.
Okay. I'm going to read your book. What am I going to learn?
Well, it's more than just the flying cars.
Right.
So 22 chapters of the 90 are on flying cars, about 3 on the autonomous cars. There's 50 chapters on history. There's a chapter on the cars, the bikes, the motorcycles,
all
and
about
the planes,
mobility.
And all
so
about
the
mobility.
history of personal mobility.
And how we got to where we are.
Yeah, moving a human body from here to there frees somebody to direct their own life, to write their own biography, to take risks, to build their own business. Human mobility is the key to a thriving life.
It is. And to vision and investment and motivation to get people where they need to go.
Very last question. We used to have horse-drawn buggies. That's gone goodbye because of the automobile. Do automobiles, personal automobiles, largely go goodbye, in 50 years from now when this becomes standard operating procedure?
I don't think so. Although there may be, I may be underestimating the potential in the sky. The skies are wide open spaces. It's like the Alaska is the new frontier, and the skies are a new frontier of mobility, and they're tremendously underutilized. So there is potential there, but I think the car is always going to be of value. I think cars will always be essential.
Where do I get the book?
Locally here at Tattered Cover, my favorite bookstore where I was first customer, or Barnes & Noble, or on Amazon.com, where it has been as high as number 7 on the bestseller list.
Tim, I really like your passion about this. You've always, as long as I've known you've been a passionate guy, but I don't think I've ever seen you light up as much as what you're doing now. So it seems like you're working hard in retirement.
I am. It's been a labor of love.
Thanks for doing this.
You bet. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.